Shall we start, Ritika?
Yes.
Simim.
A very warm and good evening to one and all. On behalf of the Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Impact and Policy Research Institute, Terry School of Advanced Studies, and India Water Portal, I extend my warm welcome to one and all to the episode 8 of State of the Environment, #Planet Talks with me, Simi Mehta. Those of us living in Delhi know that this is the time of the year. It is this time of the year that generates irritation to our eyes, bronchitis, asthma, and other related health concerns to people across all age groups. It is this time of the year that stubble burning from neighboring countries of Punjab, neighboring states, of Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, and also particulate matter pollution leads to hazardous levels of air quality index. It is important to point out that COVID-19 induced lockdown brought industrial activities, including transport mobility, to a halt. The implications on air quality improvement was so much that the Himalayan range was visible from Saharanpur in Uttar Pradesh, which has an aerial distance of 200 kilometers around. Even the residents of Jalandhar city were able to see the beautiful Dhauladhar ranges very vividly. Not just in India, but across the world, the air pollution levels declined during this period, and this gave a rare chance for the flora and fauna to breathe in fresh air. It is often introspected as what have the human beings brought on to themselves, and that clean air has become a luxury, and having this comes at great costs. To discuss more about exploring sustainable solutions to air pollution, lessons from COVID-19 pandemic, we have with us the expert himself, a renowned environmentalist, one of India's foremost environment and climate change experts, Mr. Chandra Bhushan. Mr. Chandra Bhushan is presently the president and CEO of International Forum for Environment, Sustainability and Technology. He has wide-ranging research and public policy interests. He has researched, written and campaigned for various issues ranging from climate change and energy transformation to rights of mining affected people and environmental governance. He has authored and co-authored 20 books and written more than 60 reports. Mr. Chandra Bhushan advises a range of institutions worldwide. He is an expert member of the BASIC group of countries, which includes Brazil, South Africa, India, and China on climate change. He has served as a member of Engagement Committee of the Future Earth. Mr. Chandra Bhushan was conferred with the prestigious Ozone Award by the United Nations Environment Programme in 2017 for his contributions towards the framing of the Kigali amendments to the Montreal Protocol. So with these few words, I invite Mr. Chandra Bhushan to share with us his insights on the topic. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this evening. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Semi. And I don't think you were wrong when you said that pollution also comes from different countries. This time of the year, stubble burning is also a problem in Punjab in Pakistan. In fact, it's almost like a mirror problem, and pollution from India goes to Pakistan and from Pakistan comes to India. So both state and country. So there's nothing wrong in saying that. But nevertheless, first of all, let me thank you and Arjun and all the organizations that are part of this web talk series. It is my pleasure to be participating in this, and we will discuss many issues related to air pollution. So what I'm going to do in the next 30 minutes is to give you an overview of air pollution challenges, opportunities, and solutions that I see. I have some significant difference of opinion with what is the general trend right now on air pollution solutions that we are talking about, and I like to make those points very clearly. I will also make some statements which many people might find controversial, but nevertheless, it is important to talk about things which are straightforward and relevant for discussion in current times. Because I very strongly believe that we have followed a narrative on air pollution, which is obsolete today. And for 20 years, we have followed certain narrative. We do not see the result of that narrative. And therefore, we need to start talking about a new narrative on air pollution and for environment in general. If we want to solve environmental challenges, including air pollution. So what I'm going to do is to give you a sense what I'm going to talk about. I have a small PPT, which I will put on and off during my talk. So let me just share my screen with you, and then we will we will discuss other issues. So as I said, I'm going to talk about challenges, opportunities, and solution related to air pollution. And the outline of my talk today will be, as I said, will focus on state of the debate, where we are. I'll also touch upon National Clean Air Action Program, NCAP. I'll discuss how we should be prioritizing action, because I think we have got priority wrong, at least in today's context. Maybe the priority was right in late 1990s, but in today's context, we will have to start discussing new priorities. And then I will look at three sectors: energy, stubble, and transport, to tell you what solutions can be there. Solutions that are not short-term, solutions that are long-term, solutions that are going to get us significant improvements in air quality. Now, let's start with the state of the debate. I think the problem of current debate is that it is very Delhi focused. And I believe we get the entire air pollution agenda of the country wrong by focusing on Delhi. Delhi has certain unique problems that doesn't exist in different parts of the country. But let me also say that air pollution is not a Delhi problem. Air pollution is a pan-India problem. We now see almost all cities exceeding national ambient air quality standards, and by a significant margin. I'm not talking about 10% or 20% exceedance. These are significant exceedance that we see in Mumbai or Kolkata or Chennai, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, any city you pick up. That city is not meeting our national ambient air quality standard. Mind you, our national ambient air quality standard is 3 to 4 times relaxed than WHO guidelines. Those are guidelines and these are standards, so that difference needs to be understood. Nevertheless, our standards are 3 to 4 times relaxed than WHO guidelines, and that we are not able to meet. So one, that by having a very Delhi-focused discussion, both at the center and during this time of the year, we are neglecting a large part of the country, which is also suffering from air pollution during this part of the year. Whether it is Lucknow or Patna or Agra or any other city in Indo-Gangetic Plain, they suffer equally badly due to air pollution. And their issues might not be similar to the issue of Delhi. Delhi NCR has pollution coming from outside. There is local pollution issues that is there. And therefore, by keeping it Delhi-centric, as I said, we are muddling the issue. Okay, so I think the state of the debate has to move beyond Delhi. But having said that, the state of the debate also has to move beyond cities. Again, our problem is that we are only talking about cities, but villages also suffer due to air pollution. And as you can see, villages in Delhi NCR or even outside Delhi NCR, air pollution levels are very high. So one, Delhi focus. Second, city-centric state of the debate is adding to the problem. And on top of it, if you look at GRAP, Or if you look at emergency plan that Delhi government CPCB has notified, let's look at GRAP, that gradual response action plan. What is there in GRAP? The ultimate GRAP action is that you will bring odd and even. So the ultimate problem that we see of air pollution is of transport sector. And therefore the third problem is our undue focus on one sector. I'm not saying transport is not important. Transport is an important source of pollution. We need to address it. But there is an undue focus on one sector. And I call it as a 20% problem and 80% effort. That's what transport, our current air pollution debate is all about. We put 80% of our effort on 20% of pollution problem, which comes from transport sector. Whereas for 80% of the pollution, we only put about 20% of effort. And I'm going to explain this by, again, showing you two slides, which will explain to you what I'm talking about. Now, let me share my screen again. Now, this is the energy basket of India. And as you can see, about 45% of our primary energy comes from coal, and 20% comes from biomass. About 1/4 comes from oil, and about 5% comes from natural gas. The rest of them, renewable, hydropower, nuclear, are insignificant in our primary energy basket. They are significant in electricity, but they're insignificant in our primary energy basket. Now, if you take this basket and break it into numbers, this is what you get. Because see, at the end of the day, what you burn is more or less directly related to your air pollution. Apart from the natural source, dust that is coming from land. What you burn and the way you burn determines what kind of pollution you are going to have. Now, this is the burning basket of India. So we burn every year 900 million tons of coal and lignite, 500 million tons of biomass for cooking. Still, despite giving gas cylinder to every household, which is a great achievement, by the way, but I'll come back to that issue. We burn 225 million tons of oil, about 100 to 150 million tons of agricultural residues in field, 40 million tons, again, LNG equivalent of natural gas, and 15 to 20 million tons of waste, garbage. This is what our burning basket is. And if you look at it, biomass for cooking doesn't have any pollution control equipment, so they have the highest pollution intensity. Agricultural residues, you can't have a pollution control equipment, it has the highest pollution intensity. Waste has the highest. Anything that doesn't have pollution control equipment, everything is coming out. And then coal and lignite has high because it has certain amount of pollution control equipment that we put in industries and thermal power plant. Then oil, which largely goes into industries and automobile. Out of 225 million tons, about 100 million tons goes to transport sector. 125 million ton goes to industries and other uses. And the natural gas has the lowest pollution intensity because it's the cleanest fuel. And in automobile, it is very, very clean. Now take this basket and start thinking, okay? And if you look at it, we burn about 2 billion tons approximately of things in India. 2 billion tons, 1.5 ton per person of all the fuel that we burn or things that we burn, biomass and waste. It is about 2 billion tons. And out of that 2 billion ton, 1.5 billion ton is coal, lignite, biomass, and agricultural residues. 75%. Now you can understand our problem of air pollution, why we are not able to solve air pollution problem in the country. Because our focus is on oil, 225 million tons. And in 225 also, our focus is on transport, which is 100 million tons. So all our effort, whether you look at Supreme Court judgment or the new standards on automobile sector or movement of automobile sector from petroleum to natural gas, that's what we talk about. And we don't talk much about coal and lignite. everyone knows that we have a pollution standard which was done in 2015. We are not going to meet that pollution standard. But even if we meet that pollution standard, the fact of the matter is emissions from coal and lignite industry, thermal power plant and industry would still remain significant. Okay. We are not talking about biomass for cooking. We use more biomass for cooking than whole of Africa. This is what the reality is. And biomass for cooking has huge health implications for women. And it has huge air pollution, black carbon and everything that comes out by biomass cooking. And then agricultural residue, stubble burning and agricultural residue is significant, and then waste is there. So if one has to prioritize, that's what the point I'm coming back to, what should we do? Should we leave 75% of the problem, coal, lignite, biomass, agricultural residue, and only focus on 10%? That's what we have done for 20 years. And that is why we are not able to solve air pollution problem in the country. And we will not be able to solve it if we do not address biomass and solid fuels, coal and lignite. That's the fact. Any country in the world, you look at Western Europe, especially Western Europe or United States, they first, I always tell people that we have done things in reverse. Europe, by the time Europe started talking about air pollution, and US in 1970s, the Clean Air Act of the US didn't have much problem of biomass. Biomass as cooking fuel was not a problem in US. Okay. They had problem of coal, and therefore US came out with very stringent sulfur reduction, acid rain reduction program in 70s and 80s, which is considered to be one of the most successful environmental programs in the world, that helped US to reduce sulfur emission and particulate emission from coal-fired plant and industry significantly. So what did US do first? They never had problem of biomass. They still burn some amount of residue in the field, but it's a vast country, and that residue burning doesn't seem to have significant impact on air quality, at least nationwide. But so their first port of action under Clean Air Action Plan, Clean Air Act of US, was to target industries and thermal power plant. And then they moved to automobile in late 1980s and 90s. In India, we did the reverse. Our first port of call was to focus on automobile, because Delhi had huge problem in late 1990s. If you remember, Delhi had huge black carbon problem coming out from the tailpipe of automobile. And therefore it was a very visible problem. And then Supreme Court said, let's convert all our automobile to CNG, absolutely required at that point of time. And it had significant improvement in reducing black carbon. Okay. So we started with automobile, but we never addressed the two most important points, which was coal and biomass for cooking. Now we are talking about these issues. But that fixation with automobile has not gone away. Our undue focus on automobile has not gone away. We still keep talking about, so if Delhi government wants to do something, then their ultimate thing is to bring odd and even. Everyone knows that odd and even doesn't work. And precisely for the reason that I have explained it to you. So I think that we will have to reverse the priority. Automobile is important. And as I will explain to you later, the problem of automobile is not going to be that we continue with oil, internal combustion engine. We are at the cusp of history where electric vehicle is going to increase exponentially. These technologies increase exponentially. They never increase linearly. Mobile phone or laptops and others, if you see the modern technology, any technology in history, it moves exponentially. And the same thing is going to happen with electric vehicle as well. It will move exponentially, and it is going to make internal combustion engine obsolete very soon, maybe in 10 to 15 years. So as far as automobile is concerned, we have reached the peak of technology with Euro 6 emission standards. Beyond that, it will become very, very expensive to cut more emissions from the transport sector. And therefore, keeping even Euro 6 is you know, electric vehicle will outcompete them on cost itself very soon. So electrification is going to be the issue for automobile. But coming back to the issue that if we really want to solve air pollution, our focus has to be how do we reduce biomass, coal and lignite, agriculture residue burning. These should be the priority. And apart from that, natural sources of dust, whether you take it as road dust or dust coming from land because of increasing desertification in India. About a third of our land is getting desertified. And we are actually at the border of Thar Desert in Delhi. And there is a significant source. Whenever wind blows from northwest of India or west of India, it brings dust of Thar Desert. So that's another issue that we will have to work on. Now, having said that, I'm coming to NCAP, our Clean Air Action Program. And what is the problem with Clean Air Action Program? First of all, let me say that it's an initiative that is required. We need a national Clean Air Action Plan, but we don't need a city-focused national Clean Air Action Program. As I have explained, pollution is a regional issue. Our city focus is muddling the issue and focus on how to control pollution. And therefore, the fundamental problem of National Clean Air Action Program is that it is 122 cities. We need to make those cities action plan. Don't get me wrong. Cities need to make their own clean air action plan, but we need a layer before that, which is a regional action plan, which will include the airshed of the cities, which will also include rural areas, because you want to stop biomass for cooking as well, and agricultural residues that will not get included in city action plan. So we need city action plan, but under National Clean Air Action Plan, we also need regional plans. So I think the weakness of NCAP right now is that it has not brought that layer of regional planning. One. The second is that I think the ambition is quite low. And I say that because I have never seen, how do you come to an interim target without fixing a long-term target? NCAP has not declared any long-term target, and when this country is going to meet its national ambient air quality standard. We have not set any deadline for that. But we have set a deadline to reduce pollution by 20 to 30% by 2023. So that is an interim target. So there's always a question in my head, how do you have an interim target without deciding what is going to be the long-term target? Nevertheless, that's a quibbling that I'm doing right now. But so NCAP, I think there is a need to revisit NCAP, and there is a need to look at it. How do we bring a regional element into NCAP? Apart from that, I think we are also focusing too much on monitoring. I always think that, we are over monitoring, at least in a city like Delhi. You don't need to have crore rupees monitoring station and 40, 50 of them in a city like Delhi. I am told that the air toxin program in the US actually has just 17 monitors across the country, across the United States, just 17 high quality standards, state of the art measuring instruments, 17. And that measures all air toxins. And so one that, there is a undue, we need monitors, but I think we need different variety and different kind of monitors, not just expensive real-time lakh rupees, tens of lakhs of rupees that we are investing right now. We need smart monitors, affordable monitors, which can be used for local area air pollution planning. Those are $100, $200 monitors. And those are as precise. In fact, I believe that sensor-based monitors are going to be as precise and as accurate as any expensive monitor that we are installing right now very soon, because sensors are really growing at a rapid pace, both in precision as well as in reduction in cost. So monitoring is another area that we need to decide how we want to progress on monitoring. Let's come back to the the issue of which I said. Let me just open my presentation. Yeah. Let's come back to the issue of solutions now quickly, and then I'll stop and then open for question and answer. I think the energy sector is very clear to me that India is going to, if we really are looking at how technology is growing, then it is going to be we now have to start talking about closing down coal mines over the next 20 to 30 years. It's not going to close today. In fact, the fact is a lot of coal mines are already closed. In fact, the statistics is really is startling that India has about 450 coal mines. Out of 450 coal mines, 2/3 are unprofitable. And we have more closed mines than open mines. So it's not that coal mines are not closing in this country and all the coal mines are profitable. It's a different issue. We are coming out with a report on just transition in coal mining areas, where we are now saying that in some of the districts, actually most of the coal mines have closed down or they will close down in next 10 years. So what will happen to the community there? So one, that we now have to be very serious about how we are looking at energy transition in the country, because renewable, which is very cheap now, and plus battery is really going to, outgun conventional source of energy. And I always, when people say, no, it is not possible, it will take 50 years, I show them this slide, which tells you what has happened in 40 years in mobile phones. 40 years. And mobile phone uses battery, by the way. We actually, in many ways, we live in a battery world. If there is no battery, you will not have mobile, you will not have laptop. And for us who are in knowledge industry, we live in a battery world right now. So this is what happened in 40 years. The weight of mobile has gone down from 1 kg to 1/4 of a kg. Charging time used to be 10 hours for a 30-minute talk time. That's the battery development that has happened. Today, the charging time is 1 hour for 20 hours talk time. Think about what improvement has happened in battery technology in mobile telephony. For 10 hours of charging time, for 1 hour of talk time, we used to charge it for 20 hours 40 years back. For 1 hour of talk time, we need to charge it for 3 minutes. I'm just trying to extrapolate it, but that's what it is. This is how battery technology has improved. And I have no doubt, countries who are investing in battery technology, and it's not going to be one battery technology, by the way. It's not going to be lithium ion battery or, the sodium batteries. We are going to have choice of different kind of batteries for different things that we want to do. So renewable plus battery, as far as energy sector is concerned, it is a solution for climate change. It's a solution for air pollution. As I said, coal is a major source of pollution in the country. Coal also provides 3/4 of our electricity. And they're going ahead over the next 20 to 30 years, while we should continue to reduce pollution from coal thermal power plant by making standards more stringent, putting state-of-the-art pollution control technologies, we also have to start phasing out side by side and phasing in renewable with battery technology. That's, I see, as solution to energy sector. There is no entering. There is going to be gas and in the interim, but there is also going to be large amount of biomass gas. Because if India has 500 million tons of biomass that we are burning right now, we don't want to throw that biomass either. We want to use state-of-the-art biomass gasification or other technologies to get energy out of it. It's a huge amount of energy, and it is available in all parts of the country. So biomass also is going to be modern biomass, gas, renewables are going to be the technology going ahead. Because of climate change, we will have to phase out petrochemical gas, natural gas, and then the future in next 20 to 30 years is going to be renewable plus biomass, and maybe hydrogen will come as well as industrial fuel. That's what is going to be broadly the energy basket as I see. As I said, that I am very, very optimistic about this transition, and I think there is no reason why a country like India should not be bullish about it and start investing in it rather than opening new coal mines and another thing which has huge ecological impact, as we all know. I don't think it makes sense today to open new coal mines when the existing coal mines are closing down because they're unprofitable. So that's also an issue that is a different issue, but an important issue to consider in energy transition. As far as cooking fuel is concerned, as I said, I wanted to come back to this issue of cooking fuel. That while we are giving LPG, side by side, there is something else happening in this country, which is very subterranean. And this is a picture I took few years back, not today. In fact, I think about 3 years back, on a roadside tea stall in Odisha. And this gentleman had a cylinder below and an induction cooker above. And he was doing all his business on induction. He was making tea on induction stove because it's the cheapest source for him. So he only used gas when the electricity was not there. So first of all, I think there is clearly a transition happening. We need to accelerate that transition in cooking. We want people to use more natural gas, but we also want to start moving people to electricity. And urban India is fit for moving to electricity. The other thing to understand is, which I always tell people, that Indian households, rural households especially, do not use one cooking fuel. They use multiple cooking fuel. So when they have to make tea quickly, they might use natural gas. And when they have to cook proper meal, they will use biomass because biomass is free. So this whole idea that, this cooking fuel transition is not going to take place, or it is a cultural issue, I find it a lot of bunkum here. I think that is already happening. We need to accelerate cooking fuel transition. In fact, I have a question that we are setting up gas pipeline in city because we think we will be able to, we want to give a gas connection to every household. But in my office and in my house, and I'm sure in many people's house, we are using induction as well. Okay. So if electricity is going to be an important cooking fuel, and that transition we need to accelerate. In transport sector, I have already told you that the transition is already happening. I believe that it is a matter of time when two-wheeler and four-wheeler private cars will move very quickly to electricity, because electricity is the cheapest source of most mode of transportation. This is, if you can look at this data and compare between e-rickshaw and CNG three-wheeler, there is huge difference in the cost. In fact, the fare of a e-rickshaw is half of CNG three-wheeler. This is Delhi data. Okay. And capital cost is even half. So even if we can improve e-rickshaw a little bit more, these are for paratransit, and they're more jugadu system that we have. But even if we improve it, it will perfectly compete with CNG three-wheeler. And the same thing will happen in buses as well. Because if buses have to travel only about 100 kilometers every day or 150 kilometers, we will get battery which will allow buses to do that. The problem is going to be in freight transport, trucks, where the problem of transition is going to be there, but we will have to see how that transition happens, because we are also investing a lot of money in freight in railways. Railways is already electrified. So I also see transport sector moving, and as I said, these transitions are exponential in nature. They're never linear. And I think industry is doing a mistake, but not realizing how exponential growth is. So a lot of them who are sitting pretty right now thinking that they can continue with an internal combustion engine for 20, 30 years are in for a shock, because this is going to be an exponential growth that is going to take place. Now, coming back to the issue of stubble, this is a major issue that is happening. I think, Arjun, my column is going to come tomorrow. I'm not going to talk a lot about it on stubble, but let me just say that we have botched up the stubble issue by promoting a reasonably complicated solution. All the machine that government of India is subsidizing are for zero tillage farming. This is what, whether you look at Super SMS or Happy Seeder or Super Seeder, they all are for zero tillage farming. And what we are saying for stopping stubble burning, we are saying that practice zero tillage and a stubble burning problem will also go. But the fact of the matter is, but there are two issues here. One, that for centuries, Indian farmers are accustomed to tillage agriculture. कोई भी पुरानी हिंदी पिक्चर देखोगे तो उसमें वो बैल को लेके टिलेज ही होता है. This is what agriculture in India is. We for centuries have used tillage agriculture, and now we are saying कि दिल्ली में बहुत pollution है, इसलिए आप zero tillage पे चले जाइए. So the fundamental problem is that we are not realizing that we are asking for cultural change in agriculture to stop stubble burning. That will happen, and it's important to happen because zero tillage has a lot of advantages over tillage. That will take time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And second, with all the subsidies that government is giving right now, it is still 2,500 rupees per acre expensive, which tenant farmer and a small farmer can't afford. That is why stubble burning is not stopping. The problem of a stubble burning is combined harvester, and the solution is also combined harvester. I don't understand why government has not looked at redesigning the combined harvester itself for the last few years, because those who burn stubble actually use combined harvester. You will not see stubble burning in Bihar and Eastern Uttar Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. It's very low because there is manual harvesting that happens. Wherever combined harvester is used, stubble is burned. And that is because combined harvester leaves about 1.5 feet of stubble in the ground. So why not redesign combined harvester to cut that stubble? It's common sense. And that's what I'm going to tell. You should read my article, which maybe will come tomorrow in Times of India or day after. I explain why it is feasible, already happening, just that government is not supporting it, or Indian companies are not doing it. So with that, I'm going to stop my presentation now at this point of time and open the floor for question and answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It has always been a pleasure to listen to you, your clear insights and your candid information that you always share. So thank you very much for your amazing presentation. It was really, really insightful. So coming to the question and answers, sir. I mean, there are a number of questions. So I would like to begin with, you provided that table, and where you showed that agricultural residues produce around 100 to 150 million tons.
No, burnt. We produce about 600 million ton agricultural residue in India. we burn about 500 to 100 to about, depending on which assumption you take, 100 to 150 million tons.
Correct, correct. So yes, we burn around 100 to 150 million tons of agricultural residues, but this is only restricted to some particular months of the year. But if we see, we are already burning more than 1600 million tons of other forms of pollutants, as you have mentioned, throughout the year. So does the country seem to wake up or think it as a challenge, think air pollution as a challenge only when it strikes Delhi? Again, it is closely aligned with your Delhi-centric narrative, which is always appearing in the media. So, is this correct? Or what alternative should we? I mean, this is kind of a sensationalization of the entire narrative of air pollution. That this is a very troublesome time, and Delhi is faced with so many problems and challenges. And of course, we have seen how the phasing out of diesel and older diesel vehicles that have been in place, and plus the Motor Vehicles Act, which was recently amended, which had huge amounts of fines if you are violating different provisions. These older diesel vehicles, the big trucks, the long bed trucks, and all these, they travel to different parts of the country, in the hills, in different parts of the country, and then they pollute the pristine environment over there. So, how have we been able to bring them into books, or have we not really focused on charging them or fining them because of the sheer amount of pollution that they create? What is the entire vested interest, if I may say so, in dealing with such polluters?
So I think you have asked multiple questions, not one. First of all, let me start by saying that agricultural residue is burnt in all seasons. So, for example, paddy is burnt now, but also wheat residues are burnt in a relatively lower amount, but it is also burnt. We also burn sugarcane residues in the field, okay, because the leaves of sugarcane. So if you go in sugarcane harvesting season in Moradabad and Saharanpur and other places, they make jaggery by burning the residues. So point number one, agriculture residues are not burnt only in this part of the year, they are burnt throughout the year in every season. The quantity varies. Where they are burnt also geographically, there is a variation that happens. In Delhi, I think it is important for you to understand why at this point of time, burning of agricultural residue is a problem in Delhi NCR and as well as in Punjab and Haryana. Mind you, Punjab and Haryana also gets polluted by agricultural residue. Only a part of them is transported to Delhi, not all of them. So if we assume that 15 to 20 million tons of paddy residues are burnt in 2 months, then the PM 2.5 emission from 15 to million ton of paddy burning is 4 times the PM 2.5 emission of all the vehicles running in Delhi for the whole year. I think, get it. Let me repeat again. The amount of PM 2.5 emission that is released by burning 15 to 20 million tons of paddy residues in 60 days is equal to the entire year PM 2.5 emissions from vehicles in Delhi. What does it tell you? It is a short duration, stubble burning is a short duration, high intensity polluting activity. So in a very short duration, there's large amount of pollution that happens. And if you travel to Punjab and Haryana, you can see it with your own eyes. The intensity of pollution that comes out from a farm which is put on flames. You can see that. So it is a short duration, high intensity polluting activity. Now, even a small portion of that gets transported to Delhi, it exacerbates the existing poor air quality in the city. The city's air quality is already polluted because of various factors, by the own energy and transport and road dust and industries, thermal power plant. City's air is already polluted, and then you have the additional pollution coming from northwest of India from a stubble burning. So I don't think that we should confuse it. Stubble burning does contribute significantly, but in the month of October and November, little bit of December, for air pollution in Delhi NCR. I think it is not sensationalization, it is a fact. Okay, and on certain days it could be as high as 40% or 50%. On certain days, it is not an yearly that is going to happen. So that is point number one. If anyone has visited Bhutan, Bhutan is a pristine country. And if you travel on the road in Bhutan, you will find huge amount of pollution coming from trucks. Okay. I don't think it's there is a vested interest. The fact of the matter is, if you are on hills, the pollution coming from the tailpipe of a truck increases significantly because the amount of fuel that is being consumed to go uphill is very high. So please do not compare ever the emissions coming out from trucks in hills and trucks on the plains. They will always be different. And that is why trucks are a major source of pollution in hilly areas, whether you go to Himachal or Uttarakhand or even Bhutan. Okay, if you travel in Bhutan, you will experience it. I was there last year, so I have a vivid experience of what I saw. And therefore, fitness of vehicles becomes very important, both from accident point of view and also from emission point of view. And we must have a very serious fitness program for trucks traveling in hills. Their pollution control equipment must be working properly. They must meet all the emission norms. They must be fit both in terms of safety and pollution. That is required. And I think that's where some of the work is lacking and needs to be done.
Thank you very much, sir. So closely related to your to the previous question and also to your responses on Delhi NCR, there is a question by Dr. EVR Raju. He has a couple of more questions, but because this was related, I would like to take this up first. So he asks, what is the role of the meteorological and topographic factors for pollution in NCR? What is the significance, and if you could respond to this?
So first of all, I'm so happy that Dr. Raju is here, and my greetings to him. And I think it's a very important question. So if you look at Indo-Gangetic Plain, it has a very peculiar topographic in terms of funnel. So on one side you have Himalayas, on the other side you have Deccan Plateau. Okay, and in between them, I'm trying to simplify it for you, but just want to tell you how it is. There's Indo-Gangetic Plain, which is almost like a funnel. So the pollution cannot go that side because Himalayas are there. And actually the dispersion is also very poor on the Deccan Plateau side. In fact, the predominant wind direction in Delhi is actually west and northwest. And therefore I started by saying there is pollution coming from Pakistan, Punjab. When they burn stubble, they do come to Delhi NCR. So the predominant wind direction actually, I'm more talking about Delhi NCR, is actually northwest and west. That's the predominant wind direction. And you now have a funnel where air can't disperse. And then in winters, your mixing height is low, your wind velocity is low, and therefore you have accumulation of pollution that takes place. So during winter, meteorology plays a significant role in pollution in Delhi NCR. But in summer, meteorology again plays a role because then it brings dust from Thar Desert. So in summer, for example, you will see pollution again is spiking in Delhi. Ozone increases significantly. okay, because of NOx conversion to ozone that takes place, but also because dust is coming from western part of India, Thar Desert to Delhi. So meteorology has significant role. But I also, want to add that let's not overplay meteorology, because from that factor, Chennai and Mumbai are very well placed meteorologically. They are on the coast, and the wind is high, and the wind changes every year. But still, the pollution level in Mumbai is significantly high. So meteorology has an important role in spiking the pollution, but our own activity also is a very important factor.
Thank you very much, sir. Meanwhile, I would just request if Dr. EVR Raju would like to join in as a panelist and ask in person the remaining two questions to Mr. Chandra Bhushan. If we can have this arrangement in the meantime, I will be asking the next question to Mr. Chandra Bhushan. So you have clearly pointed out that coal is, and of course, all of us know that coal is a greatly polluting component. Yet we continue with its usage undeterred, especially by subsidizing coal mining, which was very recently undertaken by the government. And on this particular step, the UN Secretary General criticized India for this step. Where do we move forward with this? Can renewable energy fully be replaced? Fully replace the conventional source of energy, which is coal? And in the Indian context, what, in your opinion, is the best renewable energy would be the most beneficial, both monetarily and environmentally?
So first of all, it's a long-term transition. It is not going to happen tomorrow. I can understand from what perspective the Secretary General was coming in terms of telling India that, all the data and information is showing that coal is not viable going ahead. It is also a polluting fuel. It also has huge contribution to climate change. So I can understand from where Secretary General has come. What I found a little problematic was that while he was criticizing India, he had nothing to say about China and US and Europe. Okay, I would have liked him also to talk about large coal users in the US, which is still continuing, or China, which is, India is a child as far as coal consumption is concerned compared to China. So while I respect the perspective from which he has come, but I think he has to be fair because he's not only talking about India. But as I said, India has, there is coal transition will take place in India. It is not going to happen tomorrow. It is going to be about 20 years. And it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. Even if you look at IPCC 1.5 degrees C report, it says that by 2050, our electricity production from coal should become zero. We should eliminate coal for electricity production. So coal, we have about 2.5 decades for this transition. And a lot of things can happen in 2.5 decades. I always tell people that we keep fighting as if the coal transition is happening tomorrow. No, it is not happening tomorrow. It is going to take about 20 years, 20, 30 years. By that time, the technology will change so much that we ourselves will stop using coal. Okay, so we don't have to keep using coal just because we have coal. We have other uses of coal. We can use coal as a chemical feedstock in some industries. There are many things that we can do for coal. We just don't have to burn coal. So this transition is not going to happen in next 5 years. Is going to take place in next 20 to 30 years. But we have to start planning for it now. Because if in 20 years also coal mines are going to close down, then what will happen to Dhanbad or Ramgarh or Jharia, or for that matter, Korba or Sonbhadra or Neyveli? These are districts which are completely dependent on coal. They are suffering because we are mining coal right now. They are polluted because we are mining coal right now. They will suffer when we will stop coal unplanned because they will not have any economic opportunities. So I think the real issue in coal is not whether transition is going to take place or not. Transition is going to take place. The real is, are we planning for that transition or not? I think that is the main issue. And I think we should start planning for that transition now, because that transition is going to be painful. It's not going to be very nice. There will be losers and there will be winners. And it's going to be painful. It's not going to be very easy. So we should start talking about a transition plan for energy sector.
Yeah, of course. Perhaps there can be a ray of hope when we are doing this transition and ensuring that we make diamonds out of these coal mines. It will be very monetarily beneficial to all these places. So, sir, you have also mentioned about the electric vehicles. We have seen in the recent days how Delhi government has promoted and encouraged the usage of electric vehicles, and they have also slashed, in fact, waived the registration fee altogether, and other benefits have been provided. So what is the lifetime of these vehicles? Have we thought about how are we going to dispose them, having minimal or no impact on the environment?
See, everything has impact on the environment. And the impact of electric vehicle on environment is going to be far, far lower than internal combustion engine. I'm also clear about it. People worry about battery disposal. Battery disposal is a real issue. But we are dealing with battery disposal for 20 years. We actually have a battery management rules in India. It's a different issue that we are not implementing that rule, but we have a 2-decade-old rule called battery management rules. So it's a real issue. Battery management in electric vehicles is an important issue, and we need to make sure that the recycling happens and it is done in an environmentally sound manner, not the way we are recycling lead acid batteries today. But even with batteries, electric vehicles are going to be far, far more environment friendly than internal combustion engine. Most importantly, they are going to have a larger life because they have less moving parts. So if you have less moving parts, you have less wear and tear, you have less friction, and the life of the vehicle is more. So I think from every perspective, it is a winner. And I'm happy that Delhi government is doing it. All the governments needs to do it, because it's something that is going to happen very rapidly. As I said, this growth is going to be exponential. It's not going to be linear.
Sure. Thank you very much, sir.
I think Dr. Raju has joined.
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Raju has joined. I have just two brief questions before I invite Dr. Raju to pose his questions to you, sir. One is that air pollution, as you have mentioned right in the beginning, that it has implications beyond its borders. How far is it true that air pollution affects the developing and the underdeveloped countries differently, and often negatively vis-a-vis the developed countries? And secondly is that we have seen a number of startups that are coming up, and they are aiming to develop air quality monitoring equipment and products and various tools. But do you think that these activities, and in fact this could be a message to the youth watching this program, such activities or entrepreneurship models would succeed in achieving their set objectives? I mean, there is a limit to how many sensors or such tools we can put at one place or throughout the country? So what other entrepreneurship ideas related to air quality monitoring or reducing air pollution on the overall can you offer that can be pursued by the budding entrepreneurs instead of simply focusing on on creating the equipment?
Okay, so I'll take the last question, because I think that's the most important question to answer. The new economy is never created by old companies. The horse cart company did not create automobile industry. Okay, it was a new entrepreneur who created the automobile sector in the US, Henry Ford. And therefore, the new economy that we are looking at, both in terms of energy transition or technology transition, will be created by new entrepreneurs. So I think we have to be mindful of this. I'm not disregarding old companies, but history is clear. You know, the landline telephone company did not create the mobile phone or are the leading telephony company today. Those who were in, typewriter business didn't get into computer business. So for entrepreneurs of this country, and I think there is a problem in promoting entrepreneurship in India and promoting new companies. We have put too many roadblocks for them, unlike other companies which are much more has a much more risk appetite with budding entrepreneurs. So my message to the new entrepreneur is, whether it is sensor-based technology, and there is a huge scope for sensor-based. Every one of us can have sensor, and sensor is not only about air pollution. Sensor is about having sensor of water quality in your house, or noise sensor. So sensor can be used everywhere, and I think that's where they should focus on. But entrepreneurs should also be open to the idea that there is an opportunity in every sector, because every sector is going to change because of climate change. So my message is that it's going to be an open field, and you all have to be really bold enough to jump in. Do not be afraid of failure. But it's easier said than done. But let me just say that. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. For the interest of time,
I would now request Dr. EVR Raju. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation and joining us. And over to you, sir. If you could unmute yourself.
I'm doing it. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Simi. Very good evening, Dr. Chandrabhushan Saab. Nice to see you. And I've read your article also earlier, and just now I have been hearing you. It's really very thought-provoking, and I think the policymakers should venture into your idea and the thought of just going around the stubble burning and leaving the other. This is what I have been advocating while I was in my service at the Coal India Limited. I retired as a general manager at Coal India Limited, Dhanbad. I served the Bharat Coking Coal Limited for about 25 years plus. And you know that it is one of the most polluted city of the town coal field in the world itself. And we have been struggling about the pollution causes. Then even the MOF, when I used to go to the expert appraisal committee meetings, they were simply banging me that the coal mining is the major, the contributor. Then I told Dr. Chandni was there, Madam Chandni. I told, why don't you just give a condition of doing a source apportionment study? Then we did a source apportionment study, and nevertheless, mining is the major polluter. But very interesting facts have come, just like the domestic burning and the coke plant burning, which nobody has just focused on those two aspects. The domestic burning is like that. See, they burn the coal openly on the street sides, and as you have shown one of the photograph of the induction heating, but they do the coal burning. So that have contributed to a very significant amount of pollutants. And again, just before I left, I was superannuated from Coal India Limited, and now I am appointed as the domain expert in the Ministry of Coal. I'll be shortly joining at Delhi. We have given one more study to the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, NERI, at Nagpur, to do this source apportionment study once again. So there's a lot of background levels coming, as your Chandrabhushan Saab has pointed out. See, for example, Delhi, maybe there are some more extraneous factors, pollutants coming from other cities or surrounding cities based on the meteorological factors. Similarly, that happens in the coal fields and the coal mining areas also. So there's a lot of intensive study has to be done before arriving at some conclusions. See, unless we do a proper study, we can't blame anybody or pinpoint anybody. So
Yes.
maybe we are missing a lot of polluters, those who are not at all. For example, I just raised one more question. The real estate question, the real estate construction activities in
Yeah.
Delhi, I think it's very rampant, and quite a good amount of pollutant should be coming from the real estate, their trucks, their machinery, and due to the wind patterns and all. So that also contributes to the what do you call pollutants. So
Yes.
if there's any specific question to me on the coal mining or about my role, actually my strength is ecological restoration. I have created forests, 3-tier plantation on spoil dumps. I've done my PhD on post-mining land use planning. What do you call it as just transition now? That I've done in 10 years back. I've done my PhD. That was, I was focusing on what the actual people need after you do mining. What is their aspiration? What is the need? The coal mining companies, what they do is, they do the afforestation, plantation, and which may not be of economic use, or they may not support the livelihood of the local people. Though I think your report will be coming from regarding the Ramgarh area, that just transition. Yes. I'm very much waiting for that.
So we are doing a national release on 24th of November. So Arjun, I will send you an invite, and you should also then get other people.
Great,
because it will be a very important report.
Great. That will be very good. See, unless you address the people's problems and issues, you're going nowhere. That I have gained from my field experience, because the people are so aggressive in the mining industry, and so they're very grieved. They're very deprived, grieved. They have a lot of problems, and maybe we environmentalists are not addressing their. We have to give solutions to them. Not this is my take, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So
Thank
Arjun,
you so much.
So I think the time is up, right?
I have some questions, but
Okay.
few questions I really wanted to touch upon. A few pertinent policy issues. Sir, one thing which you really mentioned about the diesel vehicle and what should be in Delhi, diesel, let us say, not allowed, or the older vehicles. But in hills, when we go, the very visible thing is the pollution from the diesel.
Yes, diesel vehicle, yeah.
Yes. So what the NCAP or other plants should have that, and so that is really rampant. And in most of the hills, just beside the roads, people's houses are there, and one can also see that what is happening, pollution. So what do you think, in your view? A very radical idea I also wrote article that we should completely ban diesel. But as Dr. Raju is, also saying that so many concerns are also there. Sir, other than that, I also visited in US many smart cities. They are making very much use of the sensors. So on many aspects, rightly as you mentioned. So what can our city governments, or let us say regional bodies, adopt sensors in a low cost integration manner? Otherwise, for 1-2 years, they will just make the proposal and other things for tender. And so what are the green infrastructure bottlenecks in your view, especially pertaining for execution? We have bicycle and those things, but that is really not working. That just, for namesake it is, but not very user friendly. Some few things are coming, which are people are ready to adapt, but it is really taking a lot of time. My another question was on battery infrastructure, sir. You have really mentioned. Last year we had a meeting with urban development minister. He said that it's just 2-year thing and sab theek ho jayega, especially the air pollution thing, or it's just a seasonal thing. What do you think, that NCAP, should it be revised? What should be done that there is clear mandate at especially the local level? And lastly, sir, India's position, as we say, from the second BUR, now we are preparing third BUR. So what do you think, what position this, because we are, from the report, we are champions, we are leading it. What do you think should be integrated there, that some fact should come? Lastly, sir, I really wanted to know, Europe, US, sir, you really mentioned, to finance their COVID and expenditure, they are raising green funds, green bonds rather. and now the new infrastructure or all the money they are taking and giving furlough and many expenditure from that side. What do you think about the financing of this green infrastructure and green bonds? What government should do, especially at local level? I will, yes, just stop here.
So, too many questions, Arjun, too many questions. So let me start with the first one. See, one of the things is that the transportation requirement of hills are higher than plains, and especially road transportation, because they are also not food sufficient. So if you look at hills, food goes from the plains, and all other amenities, because they are produced on the plains, they are transported. So the road transportation per capita, just to explain, road transport per capita requirement in hills is higher. Okay. Which is but natural, because they need amenities, also because tourism pressure is high. So for that reason as well. So as I said, I think we need to have a much more stricter inspection mechanism and control mechanism for heavy duty vehicles before they enter hills. That is one. And that will significantly help, because right now our current inspection mechanism is you get every 3 month pollution certificate and an annual certificate for fitness. I think that needs to change. We need to have a much frequent. So when you are moving up the hill, you will have a pollution check then and there to see whether you are meeting the pollution standard. Mind you, as I explained before, as you are moving up in the hill, pollution increases because of the amount of fuel that is burned and the pressure that is on the engine. But nevertheless, I think that is one that should be done. And the other way is that, we will also have to start increasing railway connectivity in the hills. It has ecological implications, but I think it has similar ecological implications as road. I mean to say, and wherever railway is there, I think we should promote freight also on railways to those places. Other than that, I don't have any solution. I'm not going to tell people of hills not to consume. Okay, that I'm not going to tell you. That's absolutely not there. So maybe a much better inspection and monitoring mechanism is required for vehicles in the hills. I'll go to your last question, which is on COVID and the financing for green technology. Arjun, many people tell me that I believe in laissez-faire. I don't, but I believe that many of the new green technologies are going to attract funding on its own, because they are going to make more money than conventional technology. Okay. An electric vehicle company will make more money. So today, Tesla has higher valuation than all General Motor and Ford and everyone put together. Tesla is what? It's not even a 10 years old. They've started making cars very recently. So the modern wealth is going to be very different than the old wealth, as the old wealth was different than primitive wealth. The nature of wealth is changing. So I very strongly believe that if government gives freedom to entrepreneurs, defines a framework for investment and market competitiveness, penalizes polluting technology or puts restriction on them, the modern technology will flourish on its own. You don't need money. Private sector will invest. People like you and me will invest. Recently I have started looking at stock market carefully. Just my personal experience, to see which are the green companies. You will find difficult to find a good share of renewable energy company in Indian share market. There are very less options there. So I think that it is more about creating a level playing field, you don't have to control a green technology, giving openness, and investment will come. Investment will come from outside, because our economy makes more money than what developed country does. So I'm not that worried about investment, the so-called quote unquote green investment. I'm worried about the black and brown investment that we are making right now. So post-COVID, we said we will put 50,000 crore rupees in coal freight, infrastructure development, or opening coal mines. That investment is a counterproductive investment. And the last answer I'll give, I think, about sensor-based technology, that there's a huge potential in air pollution also. You don't need 40 automatic real-time monitor in Delhi for air pollution. Okay, maybe 15 will do the job placed at the right places. You know, the 4 agencies who have installed air pollution control equipment, and they all give 4 different results. You know, we are not able to come to conclusion. You know, when CPCB says PM 2.5 is increasing, then SAFER says no, it is reducing, and DPCC says it is reducing, and someone else says it has reduced by 25%, because there are multiple agencies monitoring air pollution in Delhi. That's where sensor becomes important, because sensor is for local area planning. If you have a good dense network of sensor in the statistics, what is the statistics? Even if there is an error, but you have large number of monitors, you will nullify the error. And $100, $200 sensors is something that we can use in our neighborhood to understand from where pollution is coming in our neighborhood and what we can do. You know, I live in a sector in Noida. If I can strategically place sensors, $100, $200, we will be able to understand what is the major source of local pollution. And then we will be able to do something about it. Right now, I don't know absolutely what I need to do. People keep asking me in my own society, they think that मैं सर्वज्ञानी हूं और मैं उनको they keep asking, बताइए क्या करें? मुझे बात जवाब नहीं है. मैं बोलूंगा अच्छा यार गार्बेज मत बंद करो, कंपोस्टिंग शुरू करा दिया, घास लगा लीजिए, लेकिन मुझे नहीं मालूम. I am blind. In my locality, I am blind because I don't know what is the source of local pollution. That's where sensors are going to become very important. They are affordable. They will allow us to do local area action plan. I think it's a great idea, great technology, and we should be promoting it. So let's end at this point of time. Okay.
I had one question about China, but some other time.
Some other time.
Thank you.
Thank you very
can
much.
really propose a vote of thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. It has been indeed an absolute privilege and honor to have you. And as always, you have been so clear with your presentation. And as you see, we just want to go on and on, but of course, time is constrained. We would like to engage with you further on this topic and on your areas of expertise. So thank you very much, sir. We were really looking forward to having this conversation for a long time, and we were very fortunate that we had mutually agreeable time based on your availability. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
I really thank India Water Portal and Terry School of Advanced Studies, Team Impact and Policy Research Institute, and the audience, and Dr. Evia Raju and Mr. Chandra Bhushan. Thank you very much again, and it was a pleasure to have you all.
Thank you.
Have a very good evening.
Thank
you very much.
Have a good evening. Thank you.